Hi there, this is Chabrol from Chabrol Films, and welcome to part 28 of my Claude Chabrol season. And this is 2006, A Comedy of Power, or L'Avarice du Pouvoir, starring Isabelle Huppert, Patrick Bruel, Thomas Chabrol, Francois Berlon, who you'll probably recognise the face if you're a Jason Statham fan. He's the French police officer in the Transporter films. He was also in Tell No One. And also Jean-Francois Barmer, who gave a wonderfully chilling turn as the villain Monsieur K in Chabrol's Rien ne va plus, which is just one of the great chilling villain turns. It's called A Comedy of Power, but this isn't an Abbott and Costello film or a Farley Brothers film. This has some dry comedy, but it's not really that funny. It's not really a comedy. It's a kind of satire of, unfortunately, rich people and money men and hedge funds and sluicing the gates of business with money, giving money to foreign powers for certain favours. So Isabelle Huppert in another Chabrol film, giving another fantastic performance as always, as Juge Jean Charmant Clement, is more of an investigator prosecutor in France rather than a judge like in Britain or America. It's more an investigator, prosecutor. So she arrests the CEO, Humeau, played by Berlond, who has a very itchy neck throughout the whole film. And it's really investigating him for fraud and, moving money about and, giving his mistresses lots of clothes on the company's accounts and stuff like that. And then we realise that he's perhaps not the biggest fish, and she continues to go after more and more of his colleagues that are the middlemen of these funds. The money part is suitably vague, and I think that's a good thing in Chabrol. It doesn't get too much into the details of what's actually going on, because one, it would probably be too confusing, and two, it's not that interesting. All we really know is, there's fraud and corruption going on and money changing hands and being washed through various banks and systems. We don't really need to get into the nuts and bolts. So she kind of has a frustrated relationship with her husband. He gets more and more frustrated as her job. It's becoming more and more, she's smoking more, she's spending more time in the office, and that leads him to do something drastic near the end of the film. And her husband's nephew, Thomas Chabrol, kind of appears and stays with them for a bit, and he's more her confidant as far as what's going on, and the decisions she makes. So she's investigating this guy. Her nickname is the Piranha, so she is kind of dogged in her pursuit. She does wear red gloves for no real reason, but she does look a bit like a Giallo killer with her red gloves walking everywhere, which is a nice little touch. So the investigation is going to a certain point, and then she has a car accident. She's convinced that the brakes were rigged, so she ends up getting bodyguards. In between this story, it kind of cuts to a senator and these other people who smoke ridiculously long cigars and sit round tables drinking brandy. because these are the people who really are in charge, and they obviously aren't fans of what she's doing, so they use the promotion gag. So she gets a bigger office. They want to give her an assistant, so they give her this female assistant, and they hope that she'll do the dirty on Isabelle Huppert's character, but instead they kind of come to an arrangement to actually turn the tables on these men, so they work together to actually bring these guys down, which is wonderful. But obviously this is Chabrol, this is the real world, so even as she indicts these guys, the ones with the cigars round the table drinking brandy, they're just talking about reorganising the company and just reorganising, and they'll let these small or middle level guys just take the fall. So there's no real cathartic victory in the film, because as we know in real life, these guys at the top just get away with it and continue to live fraudulent lives and continue to make money off normal people. Chabrol does some interesting things, because there is some threat. Her office gets vandalised. There are scenes where she's alone in her flat because she leaves her husband at some point, because they have a row. So he leaves like part of the frame open in the dark, which, as we know by convention, it usually means something comes out, and it doesn't. He plays the game that we're all familiar with of people walking to their cars and the camera being at a certain distance. But again, I'll let you watch the film to see whether he does or doesn't do what we kind of expect. So he's always playing on little tropes in the thriller genre. I mean, it's not really a thriller, it's not really a comedy, it's somewhere in between. I do think it's a good film. It's not one of his best films. I think perhaps because it is kind of in between the two, and perhaps the characters, they're a bit cold. Even Isabelle Huppert's character isn't the most engaging character she's ever done for Chabrol. So I think there is a little bit of distance between the audience and the actual subject matter and the characters. At 110 minutes, it is probably too long, but it's still enjoyable. Again, he stays away from that cathartic, oh, we've caught everybody and we've indicted everybody and the world's alright, because that just isn't realistic and it's not really the real world. Unfortunately, we know guys like this get away with it, or they spend a minimum time in prison and they're just back out and they go back to doing what they're doing. So it is realistic in that sense. It is kind of playful with the form. Again, Chabrol plays with a couple of little tropes, and Isabelle Huppert is fantastic as always, not just in Chabrol films but in pretty much everything she does. And again, good support from Thomas Chabrol and Francois Berland. Apologies if that's not actually pronounced his name. Yeah, it's just a good, solid Chabrol. Not his best work, but again, this was 2006. He would die in 2010. So we have just one more Chabrol in my collection to talk about. So hopefully you'll join me for part 29. So please let me know if you have seen A Comedy of Power, This is just a DVD because it's obviously not available in Blu-ray, because that would be ridiculous, because most Chabrols aren't. Let me know in the comments if you've seen it and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me, as I say, for the last episode, part 29, where I will review the film A Girl Cut in Two and just give an overview and summation of this Chabrol journey, which I started probably about 2 years ago. It'll actually be weird not doing Chabrol videos anymore. When you think he started back in the black and white days of Le Beau Serge and Le Cousin, back in the early days of Nouvelle Vague, even though he's never really wasn't really part of Nouvelle Vague particularly. These films aren't really experimental in that sense. They are kind of traditional, but it's been an interesting journey. We've had peaks and valleys, but hopefully you'll join me as I bring the Chabrol journey 50 years in cinema to a close. So once again, thanks very much for watching. This is Saul Chironin from Saul Chironin Films, saying farewell.